It's probably okay to go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the July 30th edition of the SIG Docs call. I don't think that we have any agenda items today, but I have some stuff that I could talk about, and I'm guessing that I might not be the only one. Um, so yeah, why don't we start with, does somebody want to take notes?
Happy to.
Thanks, Eric. Um, so yeah, I was kind of thinking about some of the stuff that we discussed last time about ways to maybe make registry stuff uh, smoother in light of some of the recent refactors that have gone through. So I could talk about that. Is there anything else that anybody wants to talk about? I know that Tim, it looks like you've continued to make progress on opening PRs that add clarity and like with examples and stuff. Maybe if you want to just talk about things that are still pending or things that could make use of discussion on the call.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to start with that, and then I can go into the registry stuff afterwards, or also maybe yeah, why don't we do that if that's okay?
Sure, happy to. I have a couple PRs pending. I think two are uncontroversial. One each to expand the third and fourth sections of the doc. I have another PR to add a wit example, which sparked a little bit of discussion because there's already a wit overview section that has some amount of examples, but I felt like it was a little bit intimidating for a beginner. So I added an example section that kind of uses a stripped down version of the file systems API. And yeah, a few people thought that it was kind of repetitive from the overview section, but basically my goal is to make this accessible to someone that's not familiar with IDLs. So I'm open to any feedback on that.
So Tim, it's a little hard to hear you with your mic, I think. I don't know if maybe the wrong mic is coming through, but it sounds just very small and
Maybe
maybe
a little
kind of
muffled.
far away.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can adjust that. Is this any better?
Yes.
Yeah, much better.
Okay, great. So do I need to repeat anything?
Well, I'm gonna put the PR you're referring to in chat, so it's a bit easier. But it's the PR 287, the add wit by example. Um,
So I actually had some thoughts about this as it pertains to registry stuff. um, so maybe I'll just go ahead and say some. Well, so I was trying to recall what ended up happening when we tried I don't know, a couple months ago, um, to have the WIT packages like fetched from GHCR in the tutorial, and then we ended up reverting it. And I was trying to remember why it ended up getting reverted. And I know that we had discussed unreverting once we got to a certain point, and I was trying to remember why we reverted, what we need to happen in order to unrevert. Victor, you might remember.
I think it was broken, as in like didn't work. There was also the problem of the wrong sort of artifact went up, but I don't think that was the thing. I think the main thing was that like the instructions just didn't work. They didn't actually, like, if you ran through the page and tried to get started, it wouldn't actually work.
Okay, but I thought that we figured out how to make it not broken, and then but then it was like already reverted, and then I thought we like merged a fix and then planned to unrevert, and then maybe it did it. there may have just never been follow up. Like, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, we should be able to find like we should be able to find like the breadcrumbs. I mean, we write comments and like issues and PRs for a
Yeah.
reason. Now, hold on, let me see because there I think there was a revert PR.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put that in the chat as well for context, just in case. And that's PR number 254.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's like cargo component just wouldn't fetch properly. It was a cargo component problem. It's like the instructions wouldn't work because of cargo component, because of the custom registry, right? And like the way
Well,
to
okay,
fix it was like to update cargo component to be able to like or
no,
put
but
the
I think that
config up
I
in.
think we figured out how to configure it so that cargo component would fetch it, and it didn't require any changes to cargo component. And then it was a matter of documenting properly in the component docs how to configure things such that it would properly fetch.
Yeah, but did that ever did that ever
That didn't
happen? Like,
that never happened. Well, I think we decided to do
yeah,
the refactor stuff first, right? So
yeah,
so anyways, and this okay, so I'm trying to relate this back to Tim's stuff, but also simultaneously talk about the broader picture stuff at the same time, right? So because I think that we should reconsider the configuration section and where it belongs. And then also like once we do that and we update the tutorials to be able to fetch things from the registry, composition should also like work from the registry. And currently, at the moment, WAC only works with Warg. So I've talked with Mikhail. Mikhail's been pretty busy with his new job, but he put some effort into looking into getting WAC to leverage WASM package tools, which like can totally is a thing that can be done, right? But that essentially, even I would say, even regardless of whether WAC uses WASM package tools, I still think that like the tutorial and some of the like guest language examples could fetch WIT from a registry, and that when you're making a new project, you could be referencing WIT in a registry, and that once you're talking about doing your like bindings generation off of remote WIT rather than local WIT, that lends itself towards making custom simple WIT that might be good for examples that demonstrate basic syntactical features of WIT. So I don't know the best way to like dissect that and break it down, or if there's other, maybe let's go back to Tim's stuff and see like if there are other ideas about like ways that would make it easier for the WIT stuff to happen. But I think maybe just keep in mind that like if you framed it in the perspective of like adding your own basic thing to the calculator, right? Or like having these like simple things like that are much simpler than like the WASI interfaces. I could see it coming across to people as much less of like a wall of text that they have to wrap their head around, and it can just be like, this is an example that makes resources clear. This is an example that makes static methods clear, or So, yeah. I guess, Victor, if you like had to come at it fresh, so right now I think that we don't see anything about the registry configuration until distributing and fetching components and WIT, like until the section on registries, right? And I think in the past we had talked about maybe putting it towards the beginning of like how to kinds of stuff, so
yeah.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Have we moved on from sort of discussing Tim's ticket here, or sorry, PR, or
If
is
I
this because it sounded like you had feedback for Tim, which was use a simpler WIT rather than uh the WASI ones, which are kind of intense.
Yeah, I guess I didn't mean to move on. Sorry if I did. But yeah, and I do, yeah, I think that would be probably something that would make people, or I think people have even said that too in the PRs. But so that I think, yeah, is probably something that would be helpful, is if there was a way to have simpler examples. Yeah. You're on mute, Victor.
Yeah. Thanks. So another thing about the PR itself, I think it was also sort of like just process wise, like so new pages or new sections um generally seem like they should be discussed either in an issue, so people who are like, for example, async can kind of get, well, I mean, doesn't stop them from reviewing a PR, but like the idea of people async being able to participate and also sort of like forewarning before a large sort of diff drops would be nice. So like an issue to sort of like add, to sort of broach the idea of let's add an example section for wit, I think was one of the things that Ivan brought up, that at least I agree with, or sorry, that I brought up that I agree with, but like in general, I think um, that's worth calling out as far as like something to do in the future, and then based on, so that's one thing. The section, actually looking at the PR, the I agree with the like a simpler contract or a simpler interface like is probably nicer. I wonder if we should make some sort of section, because we have wit by example and wit reference like right next to each other. Sounds like maybe we should have a wit section and then those should be under it. So like a small organizational point. Uh, and and then if that's the case, um, then I don't particularly have a problem with this PR, like with the addition of a section with like example wits or yeah, whip by example is a good name, but like I think this is good. This is a good addition because it kind of just hits a bunch of sort of patterns that people would likely see in wit, right? Like that's the kind of point of it to have examples. But so the organizational bit and then just the thing on um, discussing it a little bit more first would be nice.
Sure, sounds good. So you're thinking a simpler example rather than the stripped down WASI examples and discussing it in an issue.
Yeah, I agree with Danny there on the simpler example. There's a lot of complexity in the, because, and there's a reason for it, but there's a lot of complexity in like in file system, right? And it's intentional, but we could probably get away with a simpler example that was more descriptive. Also, this actually made me think of the fact that we don't have any rules for our markdown. So uh, so in issue 292, I opened an issue about it so that we can just generally discuss it. I think this was last week, but basically, right now the amount of like words or characters or like the sort of width we use on markdown is a bit, or for like lines, is a bit inconsistent. And then there's the sort of I think semantic line breaks, I think, are the is the sort of like philosophy or sort of like codification of like some of the sort of patterns in sort of text formatting that you've been putting in. And like I like semantic line breaks, but we probably want to actually make a style, like a proper style guide that makes any of this consistent, because semantic line breaks are great, but sometimes I feel like there's um the formatting is a little hard to parse, and some of this is just like as an editor, right? Like just editing, and then some of it is as a reader. But basically, I opened that issue so we could probably discuss a style a style that we're not too super strict about, but at least we can automate. If we could automate it, that would be even better, because then we can just check it and fix it automatically.
When you say as a reader, do you mean for someone reading the raw markdown?
When I say as a reader, I mean as someone reading the docs, and then as an editor, I meant someone reading the raw markdown. So one example would be like, there are a whole bunch of sentences that are split up, but a sentence like, for example, I would expect to be kind of more separated, like almost like a new paragraph, let's say. Like if we're really trying to separate the ideas, then there's the explanation, then there's like an example of the like aforementioned explanation, and I would expect those to be more separate than just 2 lines in the description of the thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like semantic line breaks make sense to me because it's like, separate the thoughts, but the thoughts around describing the thing versus the thoughts around, here's like introducing you to an example of the thing, feel like they should also be separated. But like that kind of, we just don't have anything that even sort of like tries to nail this kind of concept or set it up. So of course it doesn't make sense to try and enforce something on a PR if we don't have something written down on it. So I just wanted to try and write that down. And then the stuff like line length and stuff feels like we can just automate that.
If you are comfortable reaching out to Mikhail out of band, something tells me that he'd be pretty opinionated about the markdown stuff and that his opinions would be good. Yeah, I would maybe consult him on, or just, hear what he thinks about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna put him in a comment right now, actually. And I realized that I did not link to the semantic line breaks page in there either. So, and I think that's something we should probably include just in general.
I think in my head, I should like say something that I was thinking about the wit by example like section and how I was like associating it with registry stuff, or basically like, Tim, maybe tell me if I'm like properly reading into potentially what might have been where your thoughts were in opening the PR. But like, I think just like the name wit by example kind of like says to me, oh, we want some real world examples. Like this is what like how people are interacting with wit like outside of this like pedagogical like use case, and like this is, how you would use it if you want to use this in a real project of yours. I think that specifically with the WASI like file system stuff, I think those are intentionally pretty low level, and the thought is that people like in various language ecosystems would have things similar to wstud if you've seen wstud, but maybe this could exist for file system or like specifically for IO in any guest language, but that are like wrap around the low level bindings and make something more ergonomic that people would want to use. So the idea would be like, specifically if you want to use the WASI stuff as like it's interesting because the WASI stuff are real world examples, but are also intended to be something that has like a layer that abstracts it away for you so that the average person doesn't actually have to wrap their head around, low level file system APIs, so I think that is one thing. But that like furthermore, maybe what might like a way to frame it that might be helpful is, does the calculator example exemplify enough, and could this be thought of ways of making the calculator example more robust, or maybe coming at it from, not only do we want examples of wit, but think about an example that you would actually be comfortable implementing as well, perhaps, right? Because like that might add the realness, like the by example-ness of it, where it's like, okay, this is actually a component that somebody would author if they had this wit defined. And then maybe also like a list of which pieces of wit aren't um, exemplified well enough by the calculator example. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that real quick. Just I don't think we have to over-index on the calculator example. I think it is most useful as a example of composition, and I mean I agree with the goal of something concrete or something that is recognizable as something someone would want from like a platform underneath them. Like file system, I think is the right intuition there. For example, like clocks is also the right intuition, but just maybe something that's a slightly simpler version um, of those things, right? Like, or a simpler version of something that seems realistic, right? Like if you, but anyway, yeah, I don't want to over-index on calculator, and like you were alluding to at the end there, I don't think calculator has enough sort of distinct pieces of like type like uh pieces of wit, like sort of different kinds of syntax and wit that it would be enough to sort of build out a full example on. Uh, like I'm not even sure it uses like they use variants or like sort of enums. I can't remember if calculator does that, but it seems like making a new example might be optimal.
Yeah, my goal wasn't to have a real world example necessarily, but to have an example that showed more of the features like resources. So that's kind of where I landed with the simplified file systems, but I could try to think of something even simpler that somewhere in between the calculator and what I have there.
So
Yeah. And go ahead, Victor.
yeah, I was gonna say you could go with a file system, but as long as you just don't do the WASI one, like because like the WASI one is basically like written so it works on every like across all the platforms and works in a robust way and like sort of is Unixy but tries to improve on it and do stuff like that. But it's kind of like the HTTP thing, right? Like you can write a like request response sort of like single function that just like takes in bytes and spits out bytes, and like that's obviously not as robust as WASI HTTP, but it's a lot easier to understand. So there's like you could write a file system that's just like has much more basic operations and kind of is less robust, and then that might be easier to understand. Yeah, sorry, Danny, I cut you off.
No, yeah, and I think yeah, like I think maybe the thing that I'm coming to is yeah, and yeah, don't over-index on the calculator example. I guess it was interesting because you said that like you were thinking of the calculator as a way to like inform composition. I think people don't walk away from the book today with clarity about composition. And so it's like there's a part of me that is like, could more robust examples assist in giving clarity to composition? And should this be like conversation that is about a better having a better example than the calculator example? But
Yeah, so I definitely agree that the like the way the guide is set up right now does not lend itself to like people making the jump between I made an adder so I could plug it into the calculator, right? But I think it's a structural problem, right? Because um, we have sort of a section for creating components, but we don't just create any component. We create a specific component, like with a specific interface, so that we can later plug it in to a different. We're kind of mixing up a general introduction and a like two steps in a tutorial, right? Like a tutorial with a goal or with like let's say two separate goals versus just like here's how to do it or here's how to do anything, right? We like step one is create the adder. Step two is plug the adder into the calculator, but there's no place we have those like those called out as steps. Um, they're just Like we only have creating components, if that makes sense. So like the calculator like doesn't get mentioned anywhere, but it's there, and like
Yeah.
all that gets mentioned, all that gets mentioned in creating components is the adder, and then like all of a sudden tutorial comes up, and then we're building a calculator engine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the first step was build the adder, the second step was plug in the calculator, and we kind of go over it again. Like we start from the beginning and like reintroduce the adder world essentially, but it's not coherent really.
Yeah. And so I wish that I like had a way of like expounding upon this without tying everything into the like vision that I have that is like more cohesive. But there's a part of me that thinks that a lot of this that like having the tutorial work with a registry and having things point to pre-existing wit that exists remotely is a big unblock for adding cohesion in this regard. Um, and so I just don't know the best way to be like, is it, do you iterate on what kinds of examples are the ones that provide clarity? Do you iterate on where the config for registry stuff should be? Do like, should there be a separate section that is like authoring something that imports to interfaces versus authoring something that exports to interfaces that are intended to be consumed, right? Like should we talk about like authoring a consumer component versus authoring like something that fulfills the contract that I need? Like, I don't know. I don't know that it's like a large problem that has multiple aspects to it. So I don't know the best way to break out the most quickly achievable things that help steer us in the right direction. But yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if so. I personally like the creating component section right now as it is, in that it feels like we introduce a very simple interface, right? If someone's like into typing all their stuff out by themselves, or like they get a direct introduction to how they would author an interface and then write something against it. I think that's good. Um, the tutorial, or the sort of next step from there, which is like use that component in another component, is right now under tutorial. So it's like number 8. It could go as a part, it could go under 7. And well, it depends if we switch, or if we split up 7 to be like consuming and distributing. But regardless, it feels like the tutorial that is currently under number 8 could reference the creating component section, right? So it's like, hey, and even if you, so let's say we kept tutorial where it is. So 8 is tutorial. Let's say 8.1 was create an adder component, right? Or create a simple component. And then in that page, we do nothing but like link back to, hey, this is where you would have done that. Then step 2 is use your adder component as part of a calculator component or whatever. Then it's kind of like, oh, tutorial step 1 was actually up here. Okay, I've gone back, I've done that. Go to tutorial step 2. Then like there's context for what you're about to compose / what you're trying to do, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Tim, can I ask, have you leveraged composition in your use of the component model very much? Or yeah, how much have you been using tools like WAC or doing composition?
No, honestly, I don't have much experience using the component model. I'm kind of approaching this as I wouldn't say an intermediate level
Yeah.
student myself, and asking, what's hard for me to understand, and then trying to research how to make that better.
Yeah. I think something that could be really helpful for everybody would be if you're up for it. I mean, and no like pressure. I don't know how busy you are or anything, but like if you came at it from the perspective of like I want to practice composition pretty hard and try to use the book for composition, I think is one of the weaker parts of the book, and it could help a lot with understanding where people hit the book not making the concept clear. And if if you ever want to, I don't know if you are on Zulip, but yeah, if you wanted a group chat or to like DM as you like are trying to create interesting examples from a composition perspective, I think that it could be a valuable like workshopping way about going about everything.
Yeah, I'm on Zulip when I remember to open it. And yeah, I can definitely use that.
Cool. But yeah, no, Victor, I think because immediately like what popped in my head as you were like saying that, Victor, was like I would just like want that to be a remote, and maybe I'm focusing too much on the like remoteness of it, the like having the packages or wit be remote, right? But like I think the remoteness like adds it's like baked into the workflow is that these things are intended for reuse, right? These things are intended for someone other than myself to work on this with, to make use of this. So I could like I could see like the sections kind of being like, think about what you want to be like pluggable, right? And like from the beginning, like this is the wit that you should author, where you're saying like this is the thing that will import various like multiple implementations of the same interface, right? So like start like a wit first approach, which I even think there's like an issue open that is like talking about like how to scaffold your project from like a wit perspective, and then publish it, and then author the thing that has the world that imports an interface, author the thing that has a world that exports an interface, and each one of these being a link in the tutorial that like was already covered somewhere else, like you were saying. But like I don't think that the like I love the idea of what you're saying. I think what I'm trying to say is that I really like the idea of what you're saying, but I think it would require making the preceding sections more granular than they are right now. And like that you could actually have like a list of like 10 things that like you've already learned how to do by time you get to the tutorial, right? And like that would make it feel nice if like we had like that many like link backs to see like these are all of the things that you've like learned so far, and this is the moment of like synthesis of all of these things that you've been building up to, right? um
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think we could get away with basically just I don't want to say massively refactoring, but breaking out basically section 8, like the tutorial, and making it more sort of step by step? Because right now it's basically just one page, and then we try and essentially jam through everything. Maybe if we split that out, we can hit all these. We can hit all these sort of areas like you've just described, and link back when we need to, but then add sort of new content or new goals when we need to, if that makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
for me I like feel um getting around that stuff we were talking about at the beginning about how like right now we're not describing to people how to use a remote wit package to like scaffold out a new like library, right? So like to me it feels like that might be step number one, but like also yes, splitting out chapter 8 in the way that you're describing sounds good too, but I it feels like we need to be able to do the thing before we figure out the best way to incorporate it into what we're telling people to do. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, I don't know. It's really hard to, because it feels okay. So like, for example, if you look at like the gRPC tutorial, right? Like, I think it's pretty rare that the first like introduction to building with some IDL like has you pull down a whole bunch of stuff. I say a whole bunch of stuff, but like one thing, right? Usually they try and like get your feet wet, make you write the thing, like feel like you kind of understand it. And that's the only thing I want to preserve. Maybe it's we show them the wit, because the thing is they'll have to write the world, right? They'll have to write the basically just the world declaration. But
I
maybe
mean,
we
I kind
show
of
them
like
the
the
wit.
idea.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
kind of like the idea of having like a, and this is in the opposite of direction of what the things you were just saying, but the idea of like there being a starter world and them like publishing it to their own namespace, and then like iteratively as they add a feature, like adding stuff to their world,
Oh,
like sounds like
uh,
a maybe it's too
I don't.
complex.
Yeah, I just feel like publishing. Okay, so if you were gonna like show someone how to use a Docker file, or how to show someone how to use Docker, you wouldn't have them pull down a Docker file first to start, right? You'd probably be like, "Hey, you start a Docker file with from," and then like explain that, and then next you can add like one or more runs. Um, you could pull down like a pre-created one, but if it feels like people would have more, it feels like it'd be easier to build sort of intuition of how do I do this by doing it. But the thing is, the world they'll have to write, right? Like they'll have to use the package, right? If even if they pull the adder package from somewhere else. So maybe in the creating component section, they write the world, and then like basically when they write the world, they're basically just typing in this package that they know nothing about, and then we tell them we made this package already, right? Like this WIT package. Here's how you'd pull it, and then like maybe and then there we have the listing of what the actual interface is, and maybe we can introduce the interface to them that way. But the thing is, I want people to know that they don't have to have like a registry set up or like pull from any, like you can just start with just text files, right? Like I think that's a key simplicity point to make. But they will have to write some of it is basically my main point. Or to summarize, they will have to write some of it because they'll have to write the world declaration, right? They can pull the package, the WIT package for adder, to be concrete. That's fine, but I want people to know that they could also just write the file, if they
Yeah,
wanted.
and then that brings up like the interesting thing too, which I think was also part of like why where some of the motivation around like having this stuff in GHCR in the tutorial came from, right? Was I think Mikhail was expressing like navigating the file systems and knowing like where you're supposed basically having two local projects that both want to like reference interfaces and worlds in a common WIT package, right? And like the moment you're doing composition, you want to basically have two different projects reference one WIT package. And I think the at the moment the easiest way without, right, like if you're not using a registry, you are referencing like a directory, like a multi-project directory structure that people find confusing. And so like, and people are always like, oh, like how many dot slashes do I need? It's like really hard to tell from the tutorial. I know I'm getting it wrong. I'm getting errors. The errors aren't helping me understand that the how to change the number of dot slashes in my WIT path to make the errors go away, right? So like I think that that's also quite a bit of what's motivated. Like yes, they should know how to do it, but then the instant that you are implementing something that needs to import an implemented interface, and so then you need to go implement that thing, the moment you're doing that, local file system feels that like maybe the answer is have a standard place that like have a standard way that you decide where to open one project in like relative to the other on your local file system. But
Yeah, so I agree with that. I get that point. I would say that when we if we assume that just creating a component is one step, and composing that component is another step, assuming like these are like two separate pages, then we can go fully like no local file system stuff on the composing part, right?
Yeah.
Like the multi, because like that's a slightly more complex like situation, and we can be like, hey, before we showed you how to like you could make your own, you could pull or make your own. Here in like a real world use case, or like to a more sort of what you'll most likely be doing, which is pulling a pre-existing interface. You don't want to do like, you don't want to try and figure out this like folder structure. Just use the tooling and you'll pull down what you need. So I agree with, we don't want to try and like walk through a sort of non-standardized convention for how to lay out their wit. Though honestly, sometimes that's good to have.
I just think that what I described might be what is at the root of people reading the book and then not walking away, composing their own components together, is the fact that the wit paths are confusing. Like,
I think it's more that we literally we just don't prominently put composing anywhere, right? Like it's way down in the tutorial. We have the component section now, but it's like it's just way later, right? So someone's got to go through the whole guide and get to there, and I just don't think people like. I think we probably would have seen some issues filed or something, right? Like maybe everyone just like tries to compose, it fails, and then they quit and they never try again. But I don't know. I think it's hard to know that that's exactly the reason. But I agree with composition being prominently featured. I agree with that. I agree that when we compose, we want to show them the tooling way so they don't have to try and like, so we can at least sidestep this like, random folder organization problem. So I definitely agree with those. I definitely agree with those things. If that makes sense. I like the idea of show them the simple sort of like, all you need is a text editor and it'll work. But even in there, we can be like, hey, normally you'd use tooling for this. This is the command that would like pull down that. Like we get them to write the world first so that then they can go either direction. They can go the tooling direction, or they can go the like, I'll write the interface myself direction. And then that seems like the best of both worlds. Then they like, that stands alone. They build a component. And if they stopped there, they would be okay. They could do something with WebAssembly. Then if they take the next step, they can do the composition, which is like, the more sort of real world / useful thing, or a useful thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Everything you're saying makes sense. I think where my head is that I want it definitely should be clear that you do not need the registry stuff in order to get started, right? I'm fully with you on that. Like we I'm still wondering too, though, how much of the original thing about where the registry configuration should be, and if it makes sense to have people write it up. I'm trying to decide how I feel about being like, hey, write this by hand, and then also having the same thing that they write by hand exist somewhere else. And then it's like, okay, this can either be something that you created from scratch, or also we can use that exact same example for you to go create like the exported interface remotely. Like, I don't know if you feel that is too confusing or not.
No, I think it could actually, depending on how we write it. And again, this is, I mean, it's easy to like sit here and like debate it forever. But I think depending on how we write it, it could actually increase clarity, right? Yeah. So the first thing they write is the world, right? And then we sort of like, we introduce that package and we're like, okay, we haven't told you what this package is, right? We can have them write it. It depends on which one we want to like, which approach we want to like go first. but we can have them write it so they know, or at least see it, so they know what it looks like, right? And
Mhm.
then tell them, hey, you can do that, but the better way is to use the tooling to pull the package we've already made for you.
Mhm.
And then they can see that, hey, I wrote this, like I wrote all the content literally into the file and it was on my disk. It was like wit slash, whatever. When I pull it, my folder looks different. And instead now it says like wit, depths, whatever, but that file looks like the file I already wrote. They kind of recognize the file so they can kind of build an intuition for what just happened, right? Like the tooling reached out into the internet somewhere, pulled a text file down, and put it in their local folder. Now again, this goes completely off the rails if we have them pull a WASM component, because like that, obviously is not going to be as intelligible unless we
Yeah.
like get them to run WASM tools like component wit. But like I think that is probably not ideal. Um, but yeah, like we can do it in such a way where we show them the file, maybe they write it themselves, and it's like, hey, actually, we had you do this and it works, but don't. You like most of the time you should be able to use the tooling if you're not making something custom. You use the tooling, you get your on disk files change, but
Mhm.
it's a familiar file that sort of showed up.
Yeah. I think also two things. Like, yeah, uh, not to harp on it, or maybe the reason, if I am harping on it, the reason that I'm harping on it is because the stuff that is what we encourage users to do is just words. And like, I'm not like worried like that to me feels like a less large like thing to facilitate, like the easier changes to facilitate in the book. In my head, the question that I isn't answered for me that I've been hoping to get answered for me is like where the registry configuration section should be, right?
Oh,
Because I'm like,
sorry. Yeah, sorry. When I'm like discussing it, I'm whenever they use the tooling, we have to explain that to them.
yeah.
So it's going to be wherever we tell them to use the tooling, because the tooling will not work without that configuration.
And I think the other thing, like I just for me, I kind of feel like, given all of this conversation that we've had, I still think the first step in my mind might be trying to figure out how to unrevert the stuff that we reverted, like, and just like feature somehow leveraging remote wit packages in the book anywhere, like at all, right? So that way, like that's the thing is right now in the book, we are not guiding users on how to use remote wit packages, right? So I'm just like, do it somehow anywhere, and then like we can figure out how to like split it. But right now, there is too much lift to like encourage users to do it in a real way because like it's not in the book anywhere, right? So and that requires getting the book to correctly describe what the flow is for using a tool chain, which is the challenging part. The stuff that is not like that is like patterns that we encourage, that stuff is like always easy to do, but getting it to correctly describe the requirements of the tools is like the hard part that I think that I'm gonna probably think about, but between now and next time, I'm probably going to think about what is needed to just unrevert that change. Because
Yeah, but the thing is that change doesn't um it doesn't add like a description of how to use the tools to pull. It like changes the existing example, right? Like the existing like component guide.
Mhm.
So if I don't know if that's a revert or that's like adding a new section, like a completely different PR. I'm fine with whichever. Like we'll just when the PR is there, we can talk about it and discuss it. But if your goal was to add a section that we can refer to from anywhere that describes how to use the tooling to pull down wit, I'm all for that. But it's not that's not what we. It doesn't seem like that's what we did and then reverted, right? Like,
Well,
oh, sorry, just based on that PR anyway, 254.
I think that I think that uh, cargo component does just grab what you need if you have things configured correctly, and the book did not
Mhm.
describe how to configure things correctly, and all that we needed to do was change the configuration. But instead, we reverted uh, encouraging people to use cargo component to pull things because we didn't properly specify how to configure stuff, if I understand the history properly. Uh, but Yeah. So I think that's like a thing that is interesting about cargo component is that it can pull stuff and you don't need to have the cognitive load of even like appreciating it. Right. Like, like it just pull stuff and you don't have to look at it very hard and know like what all the things are that it pulled. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see the PR. I think that'll just like, it'll make it really easy to just like discuss and merge in.
Yeah. I don't know how quickly I'll get around to it. I'll try to make time for it before the next registry call. But yeah. Sorry if that was like long-winded and if I like harped on the concept for too long. There's just like a lot of details in there and it's hard to figure out how to make it simple.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what the call is for.
Yeah. Tim, do you have any like are there any like action items that you're considering picking up that you lack clarity on that we can like help you with?
Yeah, I'll have to digest this, but I think the big action item is to come up with an example, whether it's a simplified file systems example, further simplified, or something else that shows some of the features and do that. I think it's sounding like creating WIT from text files and using the registry in my separate section. So I'd start by one and I'm planning to go through the whole book. So if someone else doesn't get to it first, I would try to implement some of the suggestions that you and Victor had for the registry explanations.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah. And again, I pay attention to Zulip. Victor pays attention to Zulip. People pay attention to Zulip. So yeah, feel free to reach out anytime.
Cool.
Anything, any other things? Cool. Well, yeah, it seemed that we had a good long session where we talked through a lot of things. I think it was good. So, yeah, thanks everybody for hopping on today. I think we can call it. I'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey.